truth is that hospitals are scrambling to find solutions to their staffing needs, and travel nursing and healthcare traveling remains the most tenable option for them in front of them. So I still see them relying pretty heavily on travel staff.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here. My name is Kyle Schmidt, and I'm one of the co-founders at Blue Pipes. Welcome to our very first Spotlight episode, where we're going to discuss with healthcare staffing agencies some of the hardest hitting issues facing the healthcare staffing industry, and get their insights to help everyone, including travel healthcare professionals, navigate the industry with ease and better information. I'm joined here by Zach Smith today from Stability Healthcare. Zach has a very interesting background. He's a registered nurse. His wife is a registered nurse. She also does some travel nursing. And Zach and his wife have a very interesting journey. Zach, I'm hoping you can start us off and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, for having me on the show. And of course, love all the work that you've done at Blue Pipes. Everything you put together there is just awesome. And I've been relying on it for many years now. And I know a lot of other healthcare professionals have too. Yes, I'm a nurse. My wife's a nurse, although my wife says I'm not a nurse anymore because I've been away from bedside for over 7 years. So I get it. I understand. There was in fact, a couple of days ago, I was using a syringe tube for, I think, one of my kids' medications, and I was pushing it, and it all of a sudden kind of squirted out real fast. And I was like, shoot, darn, well, what happened? She goes, what do you, it's like, you pull back on the pump first. She's like, how long have you been away from bedside? So anyway, I just keep thinking about that. I'm like, oh man, it has been some time. Anyway, so, I worked bedside for 7 years in a bunch of different domains. My wife's a labor and delivery nurse. She's been one for probably 14 years now. About 7 years, I stepped away from bedside to help start a company called NurseGrid, which is a mobile app for nurses, helps them manage their schedule. And then helped grow that company, and we exited around 2020 and worked with some other startups and did some other work myself. And now I'm with Stability. And I knew the team with Stability here from when I worked at NurseGrid. We did some few projects together. I try to be an advocate for nurses wherever I can, use the platform I have on LinkedIn and social media to advocate and promote causes for nurses and healthcare workers. And that's a lot of what I do here at Stability too, is try to promote, trying to be a member of the community within the company. So whenever we have meetings and conversations come up, I can bring that perspective of what it's like to be a healthcare worker, what it's like to work a short staff shift, what it's like to work a night shift, things like that into the company to help us make decisions that can better serve our community. So it's been a long journey. I am enjoying my comfy seat here on the business side of nursing. But my wife is still out there being a travel nurse. She's been a travel nurse for about a year. And, we've been just riding this journey.
Thanks for, sharing all that. That's very interesting about your journey. For those of you that aren't familiar, Stability Healthcare is they're a healthcare staffing company, that staff nationwide, allied and nursing. They have a wonderful platform. One of the first to really create a sort of self-service platform, if that's what we're calling them these days, where the candidate can come in, search for jobs, get all of the information that they need about the job, apply to the job, and really kind of have a self-submitted experience, or speak with a recruiter directly. They're still, offer a very high level of service in that regard too. So as the VP of brand at Stability, you've written some interesting newsletters and articles about the industry and issues going on in the industry. In one of them recently, you discussed the drop in pay rates as we come out of the pandemic. It was really interesting. Can you unpack that issue for us here and some of the things that you discussed in that newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right about Stability. We really led the way on technology when they founded the company in 2009. They were pushing forward with a lot of the sort of self-service technology, and in fact got a lot of the other staffing companies up and running with some technology help by assisting the community in that way. And then now everyone's kind of doing it, right? So it's not quite as novel, but we are pushing forward with all of our technology, and that is a piece of my role here as well. Is how can we build more technology for healthcare workers that really resonates with them and addresses their needs. But to your question about pay rates and stuff, I keep a close eye on the market, not just the staffing, not just the temp staffing market, but the perm market as well. And the important context to know is just like we're operating with a single piece of pie, and sometimes the travel nursing piece of the pie is larger and the perm side is smaller, and sometimes the travel side is really small and the perm side is really big. Ever since the pandemic, as we know, when censuses went through the roof and we needed a lot more nurses and healthcare workers, hospitals were hitting travel agencies really hard, saying we need more resources, and travel agencies were only working with that same size of the piece of the pie that they had always been, which was relatively small. Let's say it was like 10% or something.
Right.
And but then, so as those rates started to climb up because hospitals were desperate to put more people in, nurses and healthcare workers were leaving their perm positions and jumping into the travel side of things. But as they left that side of the pie,
right,
then they left their own vacancies over there that had to get backfilled with more travelers.
right.
And so, I just think it's important to keep that context in mind, that as people hop to, on both sides of the fence or both sides of the pie, not that that analogy makes any sense now, but as they kind of hop around, we're still splitting up the same workforce here. And hospitals become really desperate and they increase their rates to try to fill those positions. What I don't think we have seen, though, is I don't think we've really seen that desperation come into play on the perm side, where they're raising the rates like they did during the pandemic level. Part of the reason was because there was a lot of like FEMA funding that the government was pumping into health systems to help support and pay for the addition of travel nurses. But the other reason is because travel nurses are temporary, and they know that they can hire a travel nurse or a healthcare worker for 13 weeks, and then that rate is gone, and then they can post another rate, maybe a lower one or something. Right. But on the perm side, they pay that rate in perpetuity, right? And so if they're gonna pay $5 more per hour for a travel nurse, they have to pay that for the rest of the time that person's there. And then also, oftentimes what happens, and this is sometimes why hospitals don't want you talking about how much you're getting paid, is the other people will find out you're getting paid 5 more. I have 3 more years of experience, and I should be getting paid that. And then everyone wants it. So then the rates go up for everyone. So raising the rates for perm staff often comes with raising the rates for all of perm staff, not just those single people, because you're trying to fill them. And so those are some of the limitations that hospitals feel, at least the fear of rising labor costs across all fronts, both perm and temp. Right. And so, that's at least the dynamic that we're playing with. And we saw super, super high rates, of course, when the FEMA funding was coming in. That got cut. We've seen rates drop down. I think what we're seeing now is hospitals really try to, let's use the word encourage, to be friendly to hospitals, encourage nurses to go back into perm jobs to make it more equitable to be a perm staff nurse or healthcare staff member versus a temporary one, a traveler. But this can be artificially manipulated, right? Where they're like, we still need someone just as bad as we always have, but we want to lower those travel rates so that people see these staff positions as more appetizing. Maybe they do a bigger sign-on bonus that gets paid out over the course of 2 years, and you don't get paid if you leave before those 2 years. So they have different mechanisms in which I think they're trying to get back to the way where we were pre-pandemic, which was this smaller slice of the pie for travel nurses and a much, much bigger one for staff. The last thing I would just say is, and I wrote about this in my newsletter that I send out on Wednesdays to people who are signed up with us, is that we're not going back to pre-pandemic levels. The dynamic has fundamentally shifted forever. We're not going back. And one of the reasons is because we're just operating with less healthcare workers in general now. And that trend is going to continue, unfortunately. We're not training enough nurses to come into the market. And we have nurses, especially a lot of these baby boomers, that are going to be retiring at high rates. So that mixed in with the fact that we lost a lot of nurses during the pandemic because they were like, peace out, I'm not dealing with these environments. This is not what I signed up for. And we're burning new nurses out at a higher rate than we ever have before. So not only are we not training enough nurses, we're burning out the new ones that come in, We have a higher rate of retirements coming on the other end of things. And so we're operating with less nurses in general and an aging population writ large that these nurses and healthcare workers have to care for. And so the dynamics only becoming more favorable for healthcare workers. And so, the rates do fluctuate. They do go up and down. Right now, they might be down compared to where they were in 2021. They're still up from where they were in 2019. But we're going to see some fluctuation here until it settles down a little bit more. But the truth is that hospitals are scrambling to find solutions to their staffing needs, and travel nursing and healthcare traveling remains the most tenable option for them in front of them. So I still see them relying pretty heavily on travel staff.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple things in there they're interesting. This idea of I've especially during the pandemic, I've said, travel healthcare begets travel healthcare kind of thing. It's kind of one of the things that you said, this idea that as people leave, the need still exists at the place that you left. And typically they'll go and they'll try and, fill that with a temporary person because of the situation that we're in with the labor shortage, especially in healthcare. And then the second thing is, you kind of mentioned the idea of hospitals, working, maybe recognizing that they need to raise these rates for their permanent folks to make things more attractive. And so there's been an influx of strikes in that regard, right? Hospitals aren't going to just do it willingly sometimes, right? So there's been an influx of strikes, both threatened and executed over the last year. Kaiser got healthcare workers recently got 21% pay increase over a 4-year period, among various other benefits that they got out of that labor action. You kind of hinted around it, what effect that can have. Can you kind of talk about how these actions in the perm could affect in the perm markets could affect bill rates for travelers? And do you foresee any potential impacts on the industry as a result of these actions and outcomes? I mean, you kind of touched on it here and there. I mean, what specifically, drill down on that if you can, and let me know what you see there.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just think that it's important for healthcare workers to keep the perspective that, we are in this together. I don't think there's a perm versus travel battle. There shouldn't be this dynamic that travel nurses or healthcare travelers are against, perm staff. We're all in this together, and we are all suffering through the same dynamics that make this profession and this career so challenging in this particular moment. And in regards to strikes, that collective bargaining, that linking arms and standing together as a perm staff is extremely effective when you confront hospitals and healthcare institutions with this, because they need you. They need you to operate. They are a business. And if you aren't there, their business will shut down. Now, they can try to post some travel positions for those strike rates, but that is a very, very, very short-term solution to what they're hoping is going to be a short strike. And so this is just the benefit of collective bargaining and linking arms together. I don't think it always requires like a union. I don't think necessarily that unions are the only thing. However, they help organize and bring staff together around common causes. I do think we should be aiming higher, just as a community. I'll say that as a side. Sometimes I worry that I don't think we're aiming high enough, and you can shift that Overton window by aiming even higher and demanding or asking for what you really believe you need and are worth. And especially with inflation, the way things have gone, that number has gone up. I think the other aspect of this too is that, the shine sort of came off hospitals to the extent that there ever was in the minds of healthcare workers. And when they finally saw what hospitals were willing to put nurses and healthcare workers through during the pandemic, a lot of people sort of stepped back and said, oh, wait, you don't really care about me. This is a business. You're operating your business, but you're using sort of my compassion and my my empathy that I came in as a nurse to help patients, to be like, you can't leave right now. We have patients to care for. And so you would work extra, and you did that time and time and time again. And you worked in unsafe conditions, not just because of staffing, but because of lack of PPE. And so you were put in this environment where you felt like, where's the safety net? Who is our safety net? And the truth is we are all each other's safety net, because no one is looking out for us like we will look out for ourselves.
Right.
We have to be in this together, travel nurses and healthcare travelers and perm staff alike, to confront the challenges in healthcare today. And I think strikes are an important piece of that. And yes, better benefits, better pay will bring hopefully more nurses who have been sitting on the sidelines back into the profession, stabilize a little bit of this hemorrhage that we're experiencing in the profession, but also stabilize the travel market a little bit too, so it's not quite as volatile as it's been, because you get people who are getting paid $4,000 packages one month, and then the next month it's down to $2,200 packages.
Right.
And that's quite a shift, and it's really hard to plan your life around such fluctuating finances like that. So I think some stabilization would be good for us all.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of dynamics there to unpack, and I think it's a great point that you're making about, I do feel like oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, I mean, I think the conventional kind of wisdom is that the two are pitted against one another, the perm and the travel, right? And they really are kind of, hand in hand in this. And, oftentimes the dynamics aren't such that they're bringing in travelers to cut costs or lower perm pay or something like that, right? I mean, typically a traveler's a little bit more expensive. I mean, there's a reason that they're bringing them in beyond, affecting the wages of the perm staff kind of thing. So it's one of those rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
And I think, like people, I wonder if, perm staff feel like, we're taking from Peter to pay Paul, or whatever the saying is, right? Like, you're taking part of what should be a raise for me, and we're paying it to this traveler who has no loyalty to this hospital that I've worked at for years and years and years. When
right.
In reality, the budgets don't actually go that way. In fact, sometimes travel budgets come from different budget line items than they do for core staff.
Right.
But there's that animosity, right? Like, why are you getting paid so much money and I'm getting paid less? I have more experience and I've worked here longer, and I'm actually the one who's loyal to the hospital. You have no loyalty to this hospital. You're just coming in and out in 13 weeks. But part of the reasons why travelers should continue to make more, obviously, one, just to pay for their housing and their travel costs. That's a piece of it. But traveling's not easy. It's not easy to hop in for 13 weeks and then jump to another hospital in need. There's a lot, like, you have to be really comfortable, really flexible, and you should be really skilled at adapting to new environments, to moving into a place and the next day starting a new job in a new city you've never been at, around people you've never met. It's really hard work. You should be getting paid more as a traveler to do those sort of things.
Right.
What that rate is, like how much a traveler is making compared to core staff. I mean, I think that's a good debate, and it got pretty darn out of whack during the pandemic. Right. But we shouldn't look at travelers and say, why are you making more money than I am? Because the job is different, the role is different, and it's a really challenging one at that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that hospitals are doing is that we've seen kind of an increase in hospitals and hospital systems making attempts or setting up their own, internal operations to staff their supplemental staffing needs. I think, one of the things that I've heard, and I tell some hospitals, because hospitals will approach us directly and say, hey, what's your service all about, Blue Pipes? Do you have how can you help us do this on our own instead of using agencies, kind of thing, right? And so we have this conversation sometimes, and so their vantage point is typically, or the views are typically a little bit off. But what I will say is, like, they are coming out and making attempts to do this. We've seen it happening a little bit more lately than we have in the past. I mean, obviously this has been going on for a while. There are certain hospital organizations that have their own sort of internal staffing firms, right? We know HCA with Health Trust, and then there are certain hospitals in Florida that have routine seasonal needs, and they'll kind of staff those on their own to the extent that they can. But now that more and more hospitals are doing it, I mean, can you discuss the challenges they might face? I mean, do you think they'll be successful?
Yeah.
What impact, if any, does this stuff have on, on bill rates, on the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I got a really clear peek under the hood when I was doing my work with NurseGrid, because we created a scheduling platform. It wasn't just the free mobile app for nurses and healthcare workers. It was the scheduling platform where you could self-schedule and send out open shifts and things like that. So I met with a lot of hospital organizations, and I talked about those sort of internal dynamics, and I saw the people and I met the people who were in charge of a lot of these decisions. So I have some context to this, but what I also just want to kind of pivot to use another example. I see a lot of healthcare travelers who are wondering, I should just get a direct contract myself. I should go directly to the hospital, and I say, you don't have to pay this large bill rate to the agency who takes, this 20 to 30% cut and then pays me. I want that 20, 30% cut, just pay me. Well, there's a reason why hospitals hire agencies, because they can't manage hundreds of individual contracts themselves. They're having a hard enough time just managing core staff as it is. Right. But a bunch of individual contractors or however the agency hires and pays for them, but a bunch of individual jobs with healthcare staff that expire at 13 weeks, and the invoices paid every week or whatever it might be, daily in the case of stability. That's a lot to manage, and they don't have the teams or the experience or the people built up. If they were, they would then have to be adding those FTEs inside of their own organization, non-bedside FTEs, to then manage that, and then they wouldn't be able to pay the bill rates that, they wouldn't be able to shift that entire, amount of money to the healthcare worker in general. So, so that's the challenge that I think they face when they want to build out these sort of internal staffing firms inside of their organization to handle floating amongst the multiple campuses that they might have. What I will say, though, is I do think this is the direction that healthcare should move into. I think technology can play a really big role in this to remove a lot of the challenges. I think that technology is smart enough now that it can make a lot of these decisions for healthcare organizations, but it requires hospitals and these health systems to be innovative, to be open to new things and thinking about things in technology in a different way. When we were selling NurseGrid into hospitals, the amount of resistance we got from it, because it didn't have every single, checkbox that Kronos had, despite the fact that 95% of those checkboxes weren't being used by anyone. They wanted to have them all. And you feel that sort of when you're in like Epic, right? With the rows and rows and rows of tabs and buttons, and you're like, oh my gosh, who designed this? Because it's just like, one plate of food with way too much food on it. It's just like so much information. Like the UI and the UX and these programs is often not very good. And that's because the hospital is usually involved in the development of it. So hospitals are not technology companies. They're not oftentimes modern. And they have a hard time of innovating and taking risks. And so I do think this is the direction we need to go, because nurses and healthcare workers are looking for flexibility. They want to try out different departments. They would love to take a day and do telehealth work out of their week. They would love to take a day, maybe once a month or twice a month, to go work in the clinic. My wife, who is a labor and delivery nurse, is right now on a 2-month hiatus from traveling to be a vaccination nurse at our Walgreens, here in town, so she could be at home during the holidays. That's flexibility. Right. Like, she just sits in this office and gives shots all day. She's like, this is great. Now, could I do this for a year? No. But it's a really nice way to sort of unplug, do some pretty simple work, stay at home with the kids, and then get back at it after the holidays. So, that's what I think people want. They want flexibility, but the more we just burn them into their single roles and grind their bones down to a stump, working these same shifts over and over in these same environments over and over and year in, year out, of course we're going to burn them out. So we have to look at ways of creating more flexibility with our workforce. I think technology can be a piece of that. I'm not optimistic that hospitals are in a good place at doing this super well, but I do see them trying. And I guess that's a good place to start.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. You said one thing in there that really resonates with me, but I'm going to kind of hold off for a second here and unpack what I think about all this. And that is, so there's a couple of things that I've found in my conversations is in many cases, there's a disconnect between, perception and reality when I speak with a hospital. And what I mean by that is oftentimes the person, an administrator at the hospital is looking at the bill rate, and then they might know the pay rate that the healthcare professional is getting, or either the traveler or their own staff. So what they're doing is they're comparing bill rate to pay rate and thinking to themselves that the difference between those two is what the agency is keeping. I've had this conversation a number of times since 2016, when I believe was the first time I got a call from a major hospital organization, approaching us in this way. And the reality is that that's not the case, right? There are tons of costs between that pay rate and the bill rate that are not going in to the payback, all of the credentialing costs, the employer's portion of FICA taxes, just things that you don't see in your paycheck that are costs that, and so when you take all those costs into account, that difference tends to shrink to a point where they kind of go, oh, okay, now I have a better understanding what the agencies are getting. Right. And then, so that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is I've always believed that, that the reason that healthcare staffing agencies are able to provide the service that they're able to provide is because they pool together. Essentially, they realize economies of scale. They are able to, by pooling together thousands of jobs, it makes staffing jobs, some jobs easier. So in other words, a healthcare staffing agency might have 2,000 or 3,000 jobs right now, sometimes more. I mean, I think Stability has in the 5,000 or 6,000, maybe even more jobs available right now. And so when they actually do find somebody who's interested in travel healthcare, they are able to, provide to them a ton of different options. And you compare that to a hospital organization who, they're not going to have thousands unless they're pooling together jobs from other organizations, which they're probably most likely not going to do, right? They're probably going to have tens or hundreds of jobs at any given time, and it's going to fluctuate a lot for them. And the larger the organization, the more jobs they have. The smaller the organization, the fewer jobs they have. Filling just a few jobs is extremely difficult, right? Like, I always tell staffing agencies that approach us, how many, one of my first questions, like, how many jobs do you have? Because I'm worried about your cost per hire, and B, your retention rate. Your retention rate is the thing, like, when the traveler comes off contract, do you have the next contract to offer them?
Do they want to return to work with you?
Yeah. Do they want to return? Do they want to return to the same place? Can they extend at the same place? And if they can't, do I have something somewhere else that they will be interested in that I can place them in, right? Can I offer them work elsewhere? And I think this is the challenge that these hospital organizations face, is that, I think they end up realizing that the economics just aren't there for them. It's too expensive to bring on that hire. I'm not going to have, enough work for them spread out over a long enough period of time. I'm not going to have, the next job. It's going to be difficult to find the people just to fill that one job that I have, or those 10 jobs that I have. So that's one of the things. But you did mention something in there about the technology piece, and that's the part that I thought was interesting. Like, if something could get set up, and you could piece together things that basically, and I think this is what one of the things, Stability, and as you mentioned, now it's kind of a big push to sort of take a lot of the administrative cost out of the process, right? And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with the software, I think, as in general as an industry. Now, all that aside, we've also seen an influx of per diem marketplaces. These are, apps that come up and say, hey, like, put in all your information at the hospital. They create a marketplace of per diem needs on one side and candidates on the other. And then the candidates are able to come in and, accept the shifts or reserve the shifts or whatever they might do, and then go work the shift. And I think it's fair to say that, the vast majority of hospitals out there, if not all hospitals, would prefer to operate with the flexibility of per diem if they could get all of their needs met by per diem, right? And so
a lot of nurses would love that too.
Right, that flexibility. And so the question then becomes like, what effect do you think that these things have on, bill rates, pay rates, and the industry in general?
Yeah, well, at my last year at NurseGrid, this was my job, was to figure out how do we take I think at the time we had like over 1 million people who downloaded the mobile app. How do we take this crew of 1 million healthcare workers and put single shift opportunities in front of them in their area and allow them to pick up these jobs? Because in the app, we could see your schedule and you could see these opportunities, and you could just click a button, like accepting the open shift. That's what we did for core staff. So we're like, well, why don't we do this for like a community? Like offer single shift opportunities to the community, allow the community to say, yes, I want this, I'm going to pick it up. And then they work the next day or that day or that morning or whatever it might be. So like those short-term single shift per diem opportunities. And so I worked on this for a year, or at least I was researching it for a lot. And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard to do. There are some companies out there who have done it, but not widely successful in acute care. So a lot of the success stories we see, they're either like surgery centers, or they're post-acute care. Like I know in IntelliCare, one of the companies that has done that successfully for post-acute care. Post-acute care is different than acute care.
Right.
And so the acute care market is still this really challenging nut to crack that I don't think anyone's really done it at scale yet. And part of the reason was, and I'll just, these are the main reasons among many, but you have to have the right amount of opportunities and the right amount of cleared onboarded staff. So if there's 3 hospitals in an area, and we've got 1,000, let's just say 1,000 nurses in that area, or let's say 100, because 1,000 is pretty aggressive. 100 nurses in that area. Well, okay, we've got a labor and delivery position available for tomorrow, just a single shift opportunity on the labor delivery unit. So one, are they onboarded? Have they taken an onboarding presentation? Who's paid for that? How did that happen? How concise can that be? Because that can be expensive, and credentialed for it. 2, are they not working? And 3, are they a labor and delivery nurse? Can they do it? Because nursing isn't just nursing. And this was something I had to explain to our board many times. It was like, nursing is built up of many, many, many subspecialties, and you can't just cross over and work any specialty, whenever you want. So when you take those 100 nurses who are pre-qualified, able to work in a single region, and now you start splitting them up by their specialties and their availability, well, now you've got maybe 2 people who are available to pick up that shift. And if the hospital's like, I need someone today, like now, or tomorrow, and they post it, and the 2 people who are available are like, I can't, or I don't want to, or I didn't see it. Now they have an open hole in their staffing, and everyone suffers as a result. Right. So you have to have the right amount of opportunities, and you have to have the right amount of people who can pick up those opportunities inside of a select region. And getting all the hospitals on board to buy into that is really, really challenging. It's a big lift, but I've researched this and I pulled this so many times from every different angle. And nurses and healthcare workers want this. Like, they want this opportunity. If someone can make this work, but people need to see proof of it first, right? If this proof that this was working and it started to pick up steam, I think a lot of people would jump on it, because a lot of people want those per diem opportunities. The challenge is, can you still make as much money as you want to make working per diem, or are there only so many availabilities that you're working like 1 shift every 2 weeks and now you're broke? So a lot of challenges. It takes a lot of buy-in, and it's sort of like, what comes first? Do the jobs come first? Do the healthcare workers come first? Does the system come first, or the agency, if there's an agency involved? A lot of different things at play. It's really challenging, but I hope we figure it out at some point.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is, of all of the things that are going on, I mean, this is one that it really piques my interest. These per diem markets. I mean, per diem marketplaces. I mean, I think you really hit one point really well, which is there has to be consistent supply, right? Like because the patients aren't going anywhere. The need isn't going anywhere. It's there. It's not, we can't turn the patients away. The patient care has to be delivered. And that's kind of one of the, you use a travel healthcare organization, or travel healthcare because consistency, because the person's here, they're on the staff, they're part of the schedule, that kind of stuff. And so we've never been able to get to that point with any type of, because per diem has always existed, obviously.
Yeah.
It just exists in a, without the software, there's just more friction in getting those shifts filled. Anybody who's ever worked per diem as a recruiter or as a candidate, in the, old school kind of ways, the traditional ways, you get calls at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're going in last minute or calling off last minute, whatever it is. There's just a lot of uncertainty, and that's what there kind of needs to be, is continuity in order for those things to work. And it's just, that's the challenge in getting there. So anyway, there's obviously a lot of headwinds and tailwinds going on right now in the travel healthcare industry. And, and so I'm curious as to, what's Stability Healthcare doing these days to work to ensure, best outcomes for travel healthcare professionals, best information in front of travel healthcare professionals, giving them everything that they need. I mean, what are the big initiatives there? What's, big things going on there to help take care of all that?
Well, if you're looking for information, I recommend Blue Pipes, because there's a lot of good information there. So no doubt about that. But, it is true that there are a lot of headwinds. And, I talked about nurses and healthcare workers linking arms, us against the world. That goes against agencies too, right? There's a lot of animosity towards agencies, a lot.
Right.
Some of it's deserved, right? I mean, nurses and healthcare workers feel like no one's looking out for them, and sometimes they're left hung out to dry by their agencies. And so, I take that really seriously. I'm a part of this organization, a part of Stability, because I'm a member of the nursing community, and my loyalty and allegiances, I don't know if my bosses are listening to this, but they lie with the healthcare worker. No, they know that. Like, I talk about this all the time. Like, what are we doing to support them in these situations? What can we continue to add to make them feel like we've got their back when something falls through? There are dynamics that agencies don't have control of, like when a hospital just cuts the rate or cuts a contract mid-contract for these at-will contracts, and they're like, they wipe their hands and they're like, we're just going to refill it at a lower rate. There's not a whole lot an agency can do unless maybe they're the MSP player in that situation, and they can kind of push back and say, that's not right, or we can't fill it at this rate. But I'm always looking for ways in which we can better protect and support them so that healthcare workers feel like we are a member of their community, in that maybe a partner in their community, not a member of. And so I'm looking for opportunities like that and Stability. And we are working on a number of things. One of the things that I'm most passionate about is the technology that we can offer. And so I surveyed this in the newsletter. Got a lot of really good feedback about creating this sort of travel nurse calculator that can help you compare different travel contracts. Ones with high stipends and low stipends, and high cost of housing and low cost of housing. What does that mean when you apply taxes? I think sometimes it can be really confusing to figure out which package you should take when there's so many variables like that. So I helped design and create this really simple calculator that Stability was like, I love this, let's develop it. And they threw resources at it, and it's in the process of getting made as we speak. And Stability has been really supportive of all these ideas that I come to them with about being innovative and thinking about how can we provide tools that don't book us jobs necessarily. And this is the sort of myopic thinking that I think a lot of businesses get into, is like, they're like, I want to build tools that directly helps us get more revenue. And I come back and I say, how can we build tools that help support the community we're serving? You do that, and you're going to create better relationships. The revenue will come because you're giving them tools that they want to use, and it's driving them back to the site and things like that. But it's also just the right thing to do. We should be, using our position, our access to developers to create tools that can help support them on their journey of being a healthcare traveler, which is a really hard journey. We should be finding ways at supporting them through this. And so the travel calculator won't just compare travel contracts side by side, but it'll also compare against perm contracts. Once you remove some of those costs, you remove a stipend, but you increase the hourly rate, because it's not just about comparing hourly rates, right? There's other factors that go into it. And so, because a lot of people have been asking me, like, should I go to perm, right? This conversation we were having earlier. And so this calculator will help really make more of an apples to apples comparison for people to make these tough life decisions. And it's not about us saying, 100% you should always be a traveler forever. It's about saying what's right for your life. It maybe being a perm staff member right now is the best thing for your life, and we should be open and supporting them in that venture as well. And so I know Stability is also like trying to work ways, like we have travelers who are done with traveling and they want a perm job. Well, we have a lot of contacts at hospitals. How can we leverage those to get you placed in one of these positions? The other thing is just technology is evolving at a rapid rate right now. And like we mentioned, Stability was a leader in technology, and a lot of people have caught up in some of our, with some of the, sort of Expedia-like platform that we were one of the first to create. So how do we go and step again in front of the competition by creating even more innovative and cool tools? And all I can say is that we've got a lot of really fun ideas, and the team here at Stability is really open to it, and we want to build it with the community, which is something that's really important to me, is that we're testing all of these ideas before we even lay a single line of code. Before we even really hire an official designer, we're testing concepts, we're learning from their problems and their challenges, and then we begin designing solutions around those challenges. We have our eyes that really amping up our technology to, again, be the leader in this market. And just the last thing I would say is, I've really respected the way that Stability does honor stability is lowercase s, in that travel, nursing, and healthcare traveling can feel very unstable. And Stability is sort of always manages as sort of keeping a sort of an even keel with things through it all. How can we remain level and remain even so that we can at least be stable? We're not in this state where we're offering contracts where we're taking massive losses just so we can get the nurse and then figuring out everything else later. There's a lot of smaller agencies who have done that, and they're flaming out. They're smaller. They're like stars. They burn fast and bright, and then now they're and now they're burning out, right? And so we're starting to see that post-pandemic. A lot of these people who jumped into the game when the rates were super high, a lot of the agencies that did are now starting to flame out. Where Stability's been around since 2009, and I think it's important to find organizations like that who have been with it through the pandemic. But we're also not a massive organization that is so big that you are just this little tiny ant on this hill that means nothing to us. Every single one of our travelers means a lot to us, and it's important to me that they all get the care and attention they deserve. And I think Stability is that perfect size that we can offer a lot of these benefits of a larger organization, like creating cool technology, having a really experienced and broad team to support staff, but also not being so big that we become an evil machine that only cares about the numbers and not about the actual people involved. And so I'm really proud to work for Stability, and I was pretty choosy about who I decided to work with after some of my other startups and companies that I was involved with, because I do care about the nurse, I do care about the healthcare worker, and I want to make sure that my work is advancing their cause and not just at the expense of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, that's great to hear. I love to see the tools getting made to provide the information. It's one of the big things for us. At Blue Pipes, when we originally started writing content back in 2011 or 12, the idea was we just wanted to pull back the curtain, because the candidates that healthcare professionals had a lot of misconceptions, not their fault of the industry, for marketing things a certain way or saying things a certain way, casting a little bit of doubt here and there with just the way that they phrased things, and And so, yeah, we have tried to just kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about how things actually work behind the scenes, give people some tools to do that. So I'd love to hear about those informational tools. Last thing I'll say here is, if you're not familiar with Stability Healthcare, check them out at stabilityhealthcare.com. It's a beautiful website, a beautiful experience, one of my favorite in the industry by far. There's just a handful of, everybody's trying to do it. There's just a handful of them that are really getting it right, hitting on all cylinders, and Stability Healthcare is definitely one of them. And then, just getting back to the whole idea is it's not just about the technology at Stability, right? I mean, it's because they got started back in 2009, they still have that personal touch. If you need to get in touch with a recruiter, you have a recruiter, you're going to have somebody to talk to get in touch with. And that shows in the reviews. So we put out an annual list of the best companies of the year every year. And Zach, and we talked about it last year, and, Stability's made it on the last few years, really highly on the list, always in the top 10 and 5, 3, I think in there somewhere, if I remember correctly. Great reviews from healthcare professionals. We pull together reviews from 6 different review sources, so we get a really good sample size of everybody's, what everybody's saying about the companies, and that type of, those reviews can only come with great service, right? So it's not just a piece of technology that's there. That's a beautiful component of it here with Stability Healthcare. And there's a couple of other agencies out there like that have the technology as well as the personal touch, but Stability's doing it really well. And so again, check them out at stabilityhealthcare.com. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. Great conversation. Very insightful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me on and chatting with you. And like I said, I really look up to all the work that you've done with your site and the services you provide the community. So kudos to you as well. And enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Zach. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.